We've got a lot of new cameras coming out. The Lumix S1 Mark II, Sony's got the FX2. We got more stuff on the horizon from Nikon and Canon, and maybe even more from Lumix and Sony this year. We'll see. But I also wanted to kind of go back a little bit and reflect on a strange anomaly I came across. You see, these cameras come out, they make a big splash. There's a lot of reviews, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of hype, things we love, things we hate, you know, this, that, and the other. And people get a general vibe or a sense on the camera in question. And then they move on to the next thing, and months go by, and you might see someone talking about it in a comment or on a forum, sharing their thoughts or their opinions and why they love it because they bought it and it's so great, or, oh, this camera sucks, I tried it and I returned it, etc. And the two cameras that showed up, you know, the most in terms of people talking about being excited, at least where I'm looking. Maybe there's other places on the internet and you're looking and you're super excited about something totally different. But for me, the stuff I see the most about is the S5 Mark II, which I have pulled up here, as well as the A7IV, the Sony A7IV. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind-the-scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. And I want to compare these two cameras because they get talked about in a very strange way. And I want to break down some of the myths or misconceptions that I see hammered home over and over and over again. Let's go back to the S5 Mark II. When I see people talk about the S5 Mark II, it's kind of mentioned in praise for being affordable, great value, but something that always nags, you know, when people are complaining about the S5 Mark II is, one thing is detail resolving power, which I'm not really going to talk much about here. There's, you know, theories that they're doing some extra noise cleaning, whatever, on the S5 Mark II, and the pixels aren't as good as they used to be. But aside from that, the thing I see mentioned a lot is rolling shutter, and how the S5 Mark II, the Lumix S5 Mark II, is a slow sensor with bad rolling shutter performance. So here over on Cine-D, where they do their lab testing, they do this for a lot of cameras, not every camera, but a lot of cameras have lab tests over on Cine-D, and you can go look at them for yourself. I'm not making any of this up. I didn't do the testing. I'm just sharing what I found. You've got the Lumix S5 Mark II rolling shutter at 22 milliseconds. That's what it is here. And then they do some APS-C testing, and they may even do a little bit more testing. They go into dynamic range and some latitude, etc. But I want to focus on the rolling shutter because you'll see people talk about the S5 Mark II. Oh, it's trash because the rolling shutter is so bad. The rolling shutter, it's slow sensor. Oh, it's terrible. And then I was like, okay, all right, cool. Let's go check out what the Sony A7 IV lab tests say, because this is a camera that when you see people talk about it, they'll say, this is the best camera for people. Oh, it's such a great starting point. It's the easiest one to recommend. It's so good. It's so great, yada, yada, yada. And you go down to the A7 IV, and let's scroll down here to the rolling shutter test, and here it's 26.8 milliseconds. Now, if you're curious about rolling shutter, the higher the number, the worse it is. You want a low number, meaning a fast sensor. Let's go back to the 22 milliseconds. That's a lower number. That's a faster readout than on the Sony A7 IV. Interesting. I don't hardly ever see people talk about the Sony A7 IV being a slow sensor, or that they wish the sensor was faster and they have so much, you know, like the rolling shutter. By all accounts, whenever I see people talk about the A7 IV, is that the rolling shutter is good. But when I see people talk about the S5 Mark II, the rolling shutter's bad. And this is where I think some of those myths and misconceptions, the thing people just say and it gets repeated over and over and over again until it becomes common knowledge, and yet we're all misinformed. This isn't true according to Cine-D's testing. Now, maybe you've done your own testing, or you know someone else who's done some testing and they had different results. I can't speak to that because that's not what I have in front of me. But over on Cine-D, which I assume they're relatively unbiased, it's not like I'm on Sony's website or Lumix's website. They're a third party. They're saying that the S5 Mark II is faster in terms of rolling shutter than the A7 IV. The other thing that really bugs me about this Sony A7 IV is that it overheats all the time, even indoors, even when I'm not recording. If the LCD screen is closed, the camera will just get too hot and it will shut off. And these are the things I find funny and irritating when these are the cameras that are getting recommended to so many people by so many YouTubers and commenters talking about the A7 IV. If you look on the internet, the A7IV is the greatest camera of all time. And yet, if you just compare one arbitrary, feature, the rolling shutter, which the S5, the only reason I'm pointing out rolling shutter is because the S5 Mark II constantly gets criticized for having a slow sensor. Meanwhile, the sensor is faster than what most people recommend as like the best camera on the internet. It's not literally the best camera, but hopefully you know what I mean. I'm being a little silly, hyperbolic maybe. Lots of people will recommend the A7IV, even though the sensor is slower and it is prone to overheating even when it's not recording. Just being on, if it's plugged HDMI in, if the LCD is closed, it's going to get hot. Even indoors, even in a controlled environment, it gets hot really, really fast. And yeah, there's a lot of solutions. People will clip fans to it and do all this silly stuff. You can do that if you particularly like the A7IV. I'm not saying it's a bad camera. I'm not saying it's a mistake that you bought it or it's trash, you should throw it away. All I'm saying is I'm pointing out this discrepancy that I've noticed in how these cameras get talked about. People will say the S5 Mark II is a slow sensor and it should be, judged accordingly, and it should be criticized and kind of disregarded because the sensor is slow. And yet at the same time, the A7IV is praised and held up as being a great camera, an easy recommendation, one of the best cameras you could buy, amazing value, excellent, whether you're starting or you're professional or whatever. The A7IV is a great camera, even though the rolling shutter is worse and it overheats. Those are just the things that just bug me because people say them, and I think they're almost saying it like a reflex. They're just, yeah, it's a good camera. Everyone likes it. It's really good. Oh yeah, the S5 Mark II. Yeah, it's slow. I heard it's a slow sensor. This is just not true, people. So that's all I wanted to point out. Yes, it's a nitpick. Yes, it's a tiny little thing. At the end of the day, pick the camera that you like. I just don't like seeing people talk about these things when they're getting it wrong, or they're having different standards for different cameras, different brands. This one is slow, but this one is just as slow, but we're not going to say that it's slow. We're going to say this one is good. That's what I'm saying. That bothers me. That irritates me. If you're going to say your standard for rolling shutter, it has to be faster, let's say, than 25 milliseconds, well, then the A7IV doesn't cut it. But the S5 Mark II does cut it. If you're saying your standard is 20 milliseconds or faster, okay, well, the S5 Mark II is pretty close, and the A7IV is quite a bit further away. Those are the things. I would like to have a set agreed upon standard that we all say, we're comparing apples to apples now. We're comparing oranges to oranges. We're not making up what we care about based on the brand or the camera itself or just our feeling on the day. That's all I wanted to say. It really bugs me when people talk about the S5 Mark II being a slow sensor, and then at the same turn of the page, there'll be someone saying the A7IV is the greatest camera ever invented and it's the best thing you'd ever need and you don't need anything else. The A7IV gets a lot of undeserved credit. I think personally, that's my hot take for the day, for the month, forever. A7IV highly overrated in my opinion. Lots of people saying how great it is. I'm here to tell you that it's fine. It's good. You can use it if you want, but it's not all that great. And the S5 Mark II, I think, is great value, incredible value, in fact. And if anyone wants to tell you that it's got a slow sensor, then I'd say, then what, like, compared to what? What are you comparing it to? The newest, most expensive stuff, the partially stacked stuff. Like, yes, the newer technology is better, and we're getting there. I think, like, rolling shutter, though, even the newest partially stacked stuff, let me go look real quick. Did they do, over on these lab tests, they got anything new for the S1 Mark II? They do. Look at that, Cindy. Thank you. The S1 Mark II lab test. This like looks like S13 to me, but no, it is just S12. Anyway, getting distracted. Let's go down. Rolling shutter. That's a dynamic range boost off. So here's like the good rolling shutter is 12 milliseconds. A 10 millisecond difference between the S5 Mark II and the S1 Mark II. 10 milliseconds, it maybe is substantial, maybe it's not, depends on you, depends on your needs. But both of them are faster than the A7 IV. I don't know what to tell you. That's all I got to say. If you want to dive into more lab chart stuff, go over to CineD. They have some pretty thorough breakdowns of how they do what they do and all their tests. You can see dynamic range and compare. And I don't know, I'm not saying that they're right or that it's all super accurate, but they do seem to have some kind of standardized methodology for their testing. So go check it out and see if you uncover any of those surprising hidden little factoids or little myth-bustery kind of things, little debunks on some of the common knowledge that gets shared so far and so wide on the internet. People just say the same thing over and over again. It becomes a talking point, becomes a reflex. Just out it comes. It's got a slow sensor. Okay. Like, again, show me the one that you think is better, and then we'll have a discussion comparing apples to apples. But if we're just going to say one thing is better, one thing's great and one thing's terrible, and they're actually like inverted in some ways, I don't know. I just want to be real about the details we're actually comparing versus the made up hypothetical things we think we know in our minds that actually aren't even true.